There's no book on what I do. The danger is that there is a book on directing. There is no book on directing. There is no book on talking, how you talk and how you deal with actors. I think you find your own way, and you find your own way by doing it as often as possible.
Welcome back, folks. How's it going, Ralph?
Not too bad, sir. How you doing?
Very good. This is going to be a different show today. Normally, we always do our criticizing of bad movies out there or movies that actually did not make it in the box office or critically. But we've been having some recommendations that we should do. Kind of a top 5 or something like that. So we decided to let some of the people out there. Give them our perspective of what we find to be the best for at least in our list. So, and there's so many things to cover in movies. So everything from director, actors, genre movies, all those things. So once in a blue moon, we'll throw a top 5 out there for you guys. Just for shits and giggles and have some fun with it. So. But today is our first one. Our first top 5 is going to be top 5 Ridley Scott movies. So, what do you think, Ralph, about the Sir Ridley Scott?
I think this is the closest thing that I can get to a top 5 that includes horror movies with you. So I took it as a win.
Look, it's not that I don't watch horror films. It's just I don't watch them like you do. I mean, it seems like that's an obsession for you.
For a while it was. Yeah, even like I have an extensive collection of foreign horror movies because like overseas, whether it be Italy, Japan, Germany, like they go bonkers with that stuff, and like it's just so over the top. But I mean, we do in the United States too, but it's usually not as tastefully done. So,
well, I mean, it depends. I mean, there's definitely some really good, I would say, horror films out there that the U.S. has done. I just don't think it's as big. I mean, and funny enough, I mean, I can't even say we started the horror genre, but we had some good success with what was it, like Dracula and Frankenstein and the werewolf and stuff like that back in the Universal days.
Yeah, well, I mean, but those are all old like German and English stories that right. They just man, the writing from that stuff back in the old country is just like it's incredible. Like again, you put yourself in those shoes. What else did people have back then but their own imaginations to really conjure up stuff?
No, exactly. I mean, look, you had books and then you had the movies, and I would say movies were more of a new medium, a new so to try to put something that was compared to nowadays. I mean, but you look at it nowadays. I mean, and that's with any film. You look at it nowadays, and you're like, oh wow, that really looks aged. But you have to respect the effort for people who have never done this, or there was barely any movies out there done, and what the rules were, and how what worked, what didn't work, and things like that. So so we're gonna start. Yeah, we're gonna start our conversation with Ridley Scott. Ridley Scott, so is an English film director and producer. Scott began his career in television as a designer and director before moving on to advertising, where he honed his filmmaking skills by making inventive mini-films for television commercials. He made his debut as a film director with The Duelist and gained wider recognition with his next film, Alien. His work is also known for its atmospheric and highly concentrated visual styles. Though his films range widely in settings and period, they frequently showcase memorable imagery of urban environments spanning 2nd century Rome in Gladiator, 12th century Jerusalem in Kingdom of Heaven, medieval England in Robin Hood, contemporary Mogadishu in Black Hawk Down, or the futuristic cityscapes of Blade Runner and distant planets in Alien, Prometheus, Alien Covenant, and The Martian. Several of his films are also known for their strong female characters. Scott has been nominated for 3 Academy Awards for directing, which he received for Thelma and Louise, Gladiator, and Black Hawk Down. Gladiator won the Academy Award for Best Picture, and he received a nomination in that category for the 2015 film The Martian. In 1995, both Scott and his brother Tony received a BAFTA for Outstanding British Contribution to Cinema. In 2003, he was knighted for services to the British film industry. In a 2004 BBC poll, Scott was ranked 10 on the list of the most influential people in British culture. He received an honorary doctorate from the Royal College of Art in London in 2015 and the BAFTA Fellowship for Lifetime Achievement in 2018. Scott is, Ridley Scott is phenomenal actor, phenomenal director, and just has a really cool eye when it comes to, and his artistic way of doing things, which, like I said, some of the films that we have in our top 5, which, funny enough, your top 5 and my top 5 are almost identical with the exception of one thing. And funny enough, they rank differently in certain things. So, which I found that amusing. So I want to start with, so you know what? I mean, this is the way we're going to do it. So what we're going to do is, so if my top 5 and your top 5, of course, like I said, they're almost the same, except that we have different rankings for certain movies. So whatever ranks the highest will be done at a later. We'll skip the lowest. So if mine is in a number 5 and yours is number 2, then we'll cover it when we get to number 2, and we'll just skip mine. So that's how we're going to do it, guys. All right, so we're going to start actually because your number 5 and my number 5 rank differently. So we're going to skip that one. We're going to go straight to number 4, and yours is.
I wrote 3 next to it by accident, but number 4 was Legend.
Number 4 was Legend. So,
it's crazy because his whole filmography is such a palette of different things from top to bottom. Like, he's one of the very few directors that's been successful in like it's almost like 10 different genres of film. Like, yeah. You spoke about like how like he's done movies with women as the lead character. So like there was like movies where it was female empowerment. There's movies where it makes grown adults afraid of the sound of tin getting knocked on an Alien. Like the like being inside the war zone in Black Hawk Down. Legend, which is the first one we're going to pick up on, where it's like completely fantasy based on like a Disney animation. It's just crazy. Every genre he's touched, and like he's been successful at it. It's really hard to do, especially coming from a film background. Like being able to do different types of movies and be successful. It's a very
But funny enough, when you say successful, I mean, he is a phenomenal director, of course, and he's a very good collaborator with the actors. There's, he has, of course, movies that have become cult favorites that were not very successful in the box office. So, right. And he does have quite a few of those. That's what's interesting about that. But what happens is that, unlike other movies, even though they did not make it, and funny enough, they did not make it critically in some cases, and in some cases did not make it in the box office, which you would think they would, that they would slide right into our list of movies that we're going to cover. But then it seems like people go back and view his movies again, and then they say, "Oh, wait a minute, I get it now," or And there's some movies like that in our list too that they were not as successful, but now they not as successful, but they are now considered some of the best movies out there. Which is
starting the list with Legend. is like one of the prime examples of that. It wasn't. I don't want to say like my generation is the one who brought that movie back from its grave, but like it wasn't big in the mid '80s when it came out. It didn't get big until like the early 2000s. Like the people like it was like people going back to the movies of their childhood. Like when you think of and like I won't get too much into the story legend. The reason I picked it, and I'll go into that real quick, is the impact it had on me as a kid. Like it made you scared. It made you scared of the devil. Tim Curry's portrayal of the Satan-like character in that movie is literally what like probably 90% of the population envisions the devil looking like. And like just the whole it was a very romanticized, like coming to life animation movie that he made it happen. And one of the odd things that I found out through doing some of the research on it was mostly shot on a set, which I was amazed by with how much stuff they had in there. They actually literally like moved like these like gigantic trees onto a set that was used for like one of the older 007 movies out in California.
Right.
And they built and unfortunately, as a side note, was that studio burnt down. Something happened, like that whole like forest they built on the lot burnt down. But like the fact that he could make something like that come to life in a studio setting in the 80s and make it look as good as like his makeup department was top notch. It was the same makeup department that did The Howling. What was the other one I mentioned? The Thing. So like they cut their teeth on those movies for sure.
Right. And funny enough, like, that movie actually, so when you look at it, you see, critics actually till this day it holds only a 40% on Rotten Tomatoes, but with the audience it actually scores much higher. We're at a 73%. So it has become a really great cult following. Yeah. I, believe it or not, haven't seen it. I think I saw it the first time and never got to see it, like repeatedly again after that. So it's a movie that I have to actually go visit again because it's like you were saying, Tim Curry's demon, look is now legendary. Especially you see it a lot in the collector's market, when it comes to, these figures that they make.
Oh, yeah.
And, so Tim Curry is very well, besides Tim Curry being known for, of course, his part on Rocky Horror Picture Show, he's also very well known for this part.
And Pennywise, and it's all within like a decade. It's incredible.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Like he's portrayed two of the three characters are some of the scariest characters we've ever seen on film. So, Rocky Horror Picture Show is kind of terrifying too, but he's just really good.
Rocky Horror.
It's terrifying.
I'm sorry,
to some
but
people.
Rocky Horror Picture Show did not scare me at all. As a matter of fact, I never saw it until I saw it for the first time. Believe it or not, about 8 years ago, or 9 years ago. Yeah. Because everybody was always, talking about, hey, you have to see it. Halloween comes around, and you have to see how people react to Rocky Horror Picture Show in the movies. Everybody has to bring props. People, know the lines inside and out, like
Ballroom Blitz.
Could be. So that was your number 4. My number 4 is The Martian. So The Martian, which stars Matt Damon, Jessica Chastain, Kristen Wiig, Jeff Daniels, Michael Pena, Kate Mara, Sean Bean, Sebastian Stan, which is the Winter Soldier. So phenomenal movie. One of the things the reason I picked it as my number 4 was because, and in my top 5 was because it got into like, what I like a lot, which is sometimes, the science of things. And I like the fact, one of the famous lines in the movie is when Matt Damon says, "I'm going to have to science the shit out of this." And I thought that was a really cool message for people, that is like, oh, it's not like, he's not going to try to do like a fantasy. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure there was a lot of inaccuracies in the movie. That's the one thing Ridley Scott has been actually very well known for, is the fact that while he does a lot of historical dramas, not all of them are very historically accurate. So he takes a lot of what I would say a free license on some of those things that that we have seen. But the author of the book definitely praised Scott for doing a great version of his own book, The Martian. But I did like it, man. I mean, I like the fact I like the humor behind it, which I thought was great, but it wasn't overly humorous where you feel like, they were trying to make it into a comedy. I like, again, it's one of those, hey, we have to go back for somebody who got abandoned, which is, it's a trope that you see a lot in movies, but this one was done very well. I liked it a lot. I thought it was beautifully shot. I mean, when you see this in a 4K cinema or 4K television, it is so well done. Lighting and the colors, and of course the atmosphere of Mars, how he presented that. But I also like the way they try to portray NASA as, hey, we got to come together and get one of our own back. So I thought very well done. I thought Matt Damon was phenomenal on this. The fact that he had to act most of the time by himself was actually pretty amazing on that.
Yeah, I mean that brings you back to Castaway. Like when you put a person on a quote unquote a proverbial island like that to act by themselves, it's tough. Especially I think both those movies ran about almost 2 hours, right?
Well, I'm not sure about Castaway. It's 141 minutes for The Martian.
Yeah, 2 hours and 23 minutes. They're both 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Going back to The Martian, you were saying how it's great in 4K. It's one of the first 4K releases, and I think that's the only reason I picked it up. And I was really surprised by how well it carried itself and how entertaining it was, and not in a ha entertaining, but it just kept you drawn in, almost like episodic stuff on Netflix or Disney, where it's it keeps you hanging on it, and then it goes to the next part, and it keeps you engaged throughout the whole thing. So, and just obviously the storytelling with the quote unquote one man show, and the him and the landscapes you got to see was kind of cool, and how they created that.
Right. So yeah, so The Martian is my number 4. Yours, like I said, yours is Legend. So the next one is actually our number 3, and you actually had the same number 3 as I did. So we're gonna actually cover that, which is Gladiator. So Gladiator, of course, starting Russell Crowe in a much younger, Yeah, Russell Crowe started, looking younger. Joaquin Phoenix, Connie Nielsen, Oliver Reed, who actually died during filming, and then of course Jamon Hunso. I can never pronounce his name right, ever. So I apologize about that. And then of course Richard Harris. So yeah, Gladiator. Let me tell you, Gladiator, when it first came out, I mean, this is a movie that I found when I saw it, it was breathtaking. I mean, just the cinematography alone on it was just phenomenal. The fact that I think Ridley Scott was the only one, and I could be mistaken on this, but I think Ridley Scott was the only one that has ever shown the arena in its heyday, which I thought that was really cool. So Ridley Scott was the first one to actually show the Coliseum in its full glory, which I thought was pretty good. He, from what I heard, he tried his very best to try to have this film portray Rome in his most accurate way, but there was still a lot of inconsistencies, so it still had its historical inaccuracies on it, which of course, there was some fictionalized. I mean, believe it or not, there's a lot of stuff actually with Gladiator that's been turned around. I mean, when you look at the list, it's huge, but nevertheless, still a phenomenal movie, and that's the one that I believe won Scott his his Oscar for best film. It actually gave Russell Crowe his best actor Oscar also. So on that,
I'm surprised one of us didn't have this in the number one spot. It's such a go-to for anything when you want to demo an audio system or video fidelity. I mean, maybe not so much now. Have they re-released this in 4K?
yes, actually, I'm surprised you haven't gotten it because I got the 4K release, and let me tell you, one, breathtaking, absolutely gorgeous. The sound, insane, absolutely insane. So
Yeah.
this is definitely for those who are, what I would say, cinephiles or audiophiles out there. I mean, this is definitely something that and don't get the digital version, get the disc,
Right.
and definitely give this a go. I mean, because this is very impressive.
Yeah, I'll have to pick it up because I won't skip ahead to what my number 2 was, but it's one of those movies that literally I got the day it was released on DVD, I bought it, and then they released it on Blu-ray, and I bought it again. So
Dude, I think I got 4 versions of this thing. and I just bought the iTunes version, which had an extra, I think, 8 minutes.
Oh, you know what? I don't even think I have it on Blu-ray. I think I actually bought it on what was it? HD DVD. That's what it came.
Okay,
that's what it came out on.
I remember that. I remember those days, man.
I have like 15 HD. Let me tell you. Not to get off the subject of the top 5, but HD DVD was a pretty fantastic format when it comes down to specs and actual performance.
Right.
It's Sony won this time. That's all it came down to. They lost in the 80s with Beta, and then they lost again in the late 90s with DVD, and they finally won it with Blu-ray. So,
well, I'll tell you this
Sony.
much: Best Buy actually helped them win that war.
Yeah.
Because Best Buy said, "Listen, we're only going to carry one, and it doesn't cost anything extra. They both mediums cost exactly the same. We're going to pick one, and Blu-ray one. I don't know what dealings happen in the background, but So what I would say, Gladiator, of course. So I thought the effects in Gladiator, of course, were great. The battles, phenomenal. Like especially the first scene in Germania was insane on how great that looked. It was just breathtaking the way that they did that. The character of Maximus was placed also 12th in the total film list of the 50 best movie heroes and villains. And in Empire magazines, he ranked 35th in the top 100 of I guess movie heroes, which is pretty cool. So it has had its impact in film mainstream and stuff like that. So which is pretty cool. So so listen, Gladiator grossed 187 million.
That's
in
nuts.
the United States,
yeah,
and Canada, and then 269.9 million in other territories. So for a total of 467 million. Oh no, I'm sorry, 457 million.6. Against a production of only 103 million. It's funny when I saw that 103 million. So one of the things that Ridley Scott is very well known for is that he tries to do these very big scenes with a lot less. And what I mean by that is that he'll film, he'll have 10 cameras if he has to film a scene in order for him to capture every angle that he could possibly do, so he doesn't have to go back and refilm, which of course that costs money for the studios. So he's very well known for that. So the fact that again a movie that big with that big a scope, and it just seems so grand for 103 million, that that's pretty amazing. But yeah, made a lot of money back then. It still holds I believe it still holds a 77% on Rotten Tomatoes, which I'm actually surprised. I would have thought that would have been like in the 80s or 90s or something like that.
Yeah, and I can imagine if that was to come out today. I mean, it's still a good looking movie.
Oh
How
no,
much
it's
how
it's
much money
still
how much
great.
money it would have made?
So, and then of course its soundtrack, which was done by Hans Zimmer. It was composed by Hans Zimmer, and I don't remember if he actually got. I know he got nominated for an Oscar. I believe he probably won an Oscar for that, but I could be mistaken. I'm gonna have to check my sources on that. But definitely made the movie. I think, and also that soundtrack has been used in whether it's sporting events, whether you hear it on something else that somebody grabs it for something. So it was. I think it's one of Hans Zimmer's top scores. And we will probably do a top five for Hans Zimmer. I could definitely tell you that Gladiator is probably going to be on my top five on that.
No, it's just one of those movies that transcends. It's I don't want to put it. I mean, it's in the same company as like a Godfather, Scarface, where 20, 30 years from now you're gonna watch it. And it's not gonna really show its age a whole lot.
No, it won't.
And it's gonna still look good. It's gonna still look appropriate, and people are gonna enjoy it.
Right. So that's actually our number 3. So the next one is actually funny because the next one is your number 5. No, I'm sorry.
Your number.
Your
5.
next one is my number 5, but your number 2, which is Black Hawk Down. So Black Hawk Down is a 2001 war film directed, of course, and produced by Ridley Scott and co-produced by Jerry Bruckheimer. Interesting enough, I mean, this was based off of a 1999 nonfiction book by the same name by journalist Mark Bowden about the U.S. military's 1993 raid in Mogadishu. The film features a large assembled cast, including Josh Hartnett, Ian McGregor, Eric Bana, Tom Sizemore, William Fichtner, Sam Shepard, Jeremy Piven, and Tom Hardy in one of his first roles, which I'm going to have to actually, look very carefully to see which one was Tom Hardy. But also Orlando Bloom was in it, Ty Burrell. So yeah, they had a huge cast in there.
Well, and going back, it was huge. Like
Yeah.
at the time, Hartnett was the only one that was a known commodity.
Yes, exactly. So, and then Black Hawk Down also had a limited release in December 28, 2001, and then went into the public on January 18, 2002. The film received positive reviews from film critics, although it was criticized again for its inaccuracies and sparked controversy for its portrayal of Somalis. So that's one of the big things that when you watch this film, the way they're portrayed, not very favorable. As a matter of fact, a lot of complaints from Somali organizations and things like that. But yeah, so this was a film that was extremely visceral. One thing I liked about the way Ridley Scott captured the moment was that while he did have some wide shots, which were really cool, he had very in your face camera angles where you're right there in the trenches with the soldiers and the Delta Force and all that stuff. So really cool. I mean, great acting, of course, by everybody. And again, it had a really kind of a strange soundtrack to it, which I always liked. It kind of had almost an ethereal sound to it in certain cases. But yeah, no, phenomenal film. Of course, did very well in the box office. I mean, it was a $92 million budget, but it only did $173 million. So I'm not going to say that it was super. I mean, it did its money back, but I'm not going to say that it broke all kinds of records. But from what I've seen, it tends to be kind of a favorite among a lot of my friends and family that they've watched it.
Obviously, it's based on a true story, so it's not like the writing of it. I mean, it was well written. Don't get me wrong, but like it's not like it was something that was a brainchild of somebody or taken from a fictional work and brought to life. It was just something that was kind of like reimagined for the cinema, and like he did just such a great job.
It was extremely reimagined, actually. I mean, because from some of the snipers, Navy SEAL, I think Navy SEAL even, there were certain groups of the military that were not included in the film that were actually in the operation that happened in over there. So I mean, it got criticized that way, but again, still a great movie. Just so you know, this film got nominated for 5 Academy Awards. They won 2, one for best film editing, and the other one is for sound, which was great. So no, extremely. I mean, it got nominated for a lot of different awards, like 20 different types of awards, including the Oscars, BAFTA awards, AFI awards, Saturn awards, you name it. I mean, the list just goes on and on. So so many nominations. I mean, it only won about, I would say, 8 of those awards, I believe. Out of all those nominations that it had, but it was, I mean, still a great movie. I mean, just absolutely amazing. So yeah. So our next, so the next one that we have. So again, because your list and my list being the same, almost the same. Trying to see here how we're going to actually cover these last 3. So actually, the last 2, yeah. So the last 2, I would say, screw it. I mean, we'll do yours and then we'll do mine. So your number 5 was actually Blade Runner. Let's start with.
I have my reasons.
Let's start with that.
I was never a big fan of Blade Runner.
Bite your tongue, man.
Well, I've watched it a lot. I love Harrison Ford. I like 2049. I like it for the technical aspects of it. So like that's why a couple of honestly that I could have easily moved that up to 4th over Legend. Okay. But I like Legend for the technical and the story aspect, as to where the Blade Runner I like just purely for the technical aspect of the sound, the sights, just like the vision, like the cinematography, right. All the technical, the story. I could give some take some of it. It's not something I would literally hit I didn't get a chance when I really wanted to before we did this. I wanted to watch it again. Because it's not a story that sticks with me. It really isn't. Like the other 4 movies ahead of it, I could mentally go through the storylines and remember stuff from it. And I haven't seen them in 20 years, in 10 years, right? Blade Runner is just hard for me. I remember a lot of neon lights and a lot of cool sounds. That's pretty much where it starts and ends with me. And I can sit there and watch it again. And I don't dislike the movie. It's just it doesn't rate up there with the rest of them for me.
So yeah, so now for me, it's actually Blade Runner, I'd ranked it as my number 1, and the reason for that, okay, so Blade Runner being, it's a film that came out in 1982. And of course, I got interested in it because it had Harrison Ford in it. Of course, Harrison Ford coming off of Star Wars, coming off of Raiders of the Lost Ark. My thought is, oh, it's another sci-fi movie. I would love to see Harrison Ford, do some sci-fi. When I first saw it, I didn't know what to make of it. And I'm going to be very honest with you about this. I don't think I was not mentally matured to appreciate what this movie is. So Blade Runner, for those of you who, don't know much about it. So Blade Runner is actually based off of Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. So it was actually, and funny enough, the movie itself is really, I think, a chapter in that entire novel, I believe. Something like that. I tried to read that novel one time, and it was just, it was a hard read. But it really was. But, so it was adapted, from that. So, of course, it started Harrison Ford, but it also started Rutger Hauer, Sean Young, and Edward James Olmos, which I thought was pretty cool. So it is, the one thing that I would say that this film did, which now when you look at it, it is considered probably one of the top sci-fi movies of all time. And the reason for that, it was because of its influence on other sci-fi films and video games and anime, television series, things like that. So it had kind of it has a very what they call tech noir, which has spawned off a lot of different genres through film and things like that. The visual effects, of course, stunning. You had, of course, the score by Vangelis, which made the film just what it was. It just that great soundtrack of something that you just was never heard before, something like that. So, but believe it or not, do you realize there's 7 versions of this film?
Oh yeah. Well, on that, so speaking of earlier, the HD DVD, I think has 4 versions of it in the one package.
Does it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually bought one that came in so in the film there's this like this lie detector test called a void comp, which is how you detect the replicants. So, for those of you who don't know, I mean, and of course, all this is spoilers ahead, of course. So, Blade Runner has to do with the fact that in this world, replicants, which are robots, are pretty much look like humans, and they're actually made for slave labor and to work off world. And the Nexus 5, which is a version of those robots coming from the Tyrell Corporation, they decide to come back to Earth, and they only have a 5-year lifespan, but they want to actually live for a longer time, of course. So in this whole movie, in order for you to detect who is a replica or not, is called the void comp test. So it's actually a series of questions and things like that, and then of course how their iris and their pupil actually react to certain questions. So when the movie came out with a ton of different versions, they came out with it like this was back when DVDs actually had really cool package designs, and they came out with a void comp briefcase where you had all the different versions in there. You had a small slice of the film itself, which was really cool. They had like an origami of the unicorn that Edward James Olmos always has in the film. So they did some really cool stuff. Yeah, but 7 versions, and then the last one is the ultimate cut, and that one is I believe the only one that was done by Ridley Scott, which was kind of crazy. So. And he was supposed to do Blade Runner 2049, but then he released it. He gave that duty to Denis Villeneuve, who did Dune, actually. So, but yeah, so that's one of the reasons I like Blade Runner. Blade Runner is just not only the look of it, the cinematography, just the environment. When you read up on how the movie was made and the visual effects, how they were made, I mean, it's just all groundbreaking things that they did with that movie. So phenomenal way. For me, that's why it ranks as his number 1, because again, it inspired a ton of other directors and filmmakers and creative people on how to do a future that doesn't have to look all shiny. And unlike Lucas, who did a future or did a sci-fi film like Star Wars that was dirty, and it wasn't like the shiny spaceships and interiors. Lucas made it look used and worn, but Ridley Scott really made Earth like a version of Earth in the future. The way it looked, it was futuristic, but at the same time kind of grounded almost in reality in certain ways. But this is a movie that really didn't make that much money, as a matter of fact. I mean, this was a $30 million movie that only made $41.6 million. And believe it or not, I mean, this is a movie that didn't score that high in Rotten Tomatoes. Well, back then there was no Rotten Tomatoes. So, but nowadays it holds an 89% approval rating, which is crazy. But when it first came out, not many people liked it.
I used to always get it confused with Running Man.
With Running Man?
I mean, I was 8 years old. Relax.
You're out of your mind.
It was Blade Runner and Running Man were always like next to each other at the video rental store, man.
You're crazy.
I'm sorry.
Man.
Let's bring it back, people. back in the day, me and Rob used to go to a place where you could rent VHS tapes to take home for like 2 days to watch.
Yeah. And then they would charge you a metric ton of money if you didn't rewind it. So, of course, what do we have to do? We actually bought ourselves a VHS rewinder
shaped like a car.
It's like a cassette thing. You put it in there and it's just you rewind it because you didn't want to forget to rewind that. Oh man, those days were crazy.
Dude, those are good times, the 80s and 90s.
So Blade Runner, that's my number 1. It's actually your number
5.
Your number 5. And then of course, your number 1, which actually turned out to be my number 2, of course, is the movie Alien. Alien is probably one of the most, when I first saw it, one of the most horrifying movies I've ever seen. Alien scared the shit out of me when I was young, man.
It still scares me.
Funny enough, I remember getting the latest 4K version of it, right, which looks gorgeous. And I'm in my room and I'm watching it and I'm going, yo, this thing is still scary, man. I don't know. I think I'm gonna put the lights on. Because let me tell you, so Alien, when it first came out, so Alien, of course, is a sci-fi movie about a ship that is on its way back to Earth, but of course they get deviated to a derelict planet where they find a derelict ship, and that derelict ship actually has these eggs in it that, of course, have some kind of alien embryo or something like that, or some kind of what they call a face hugger, and then it wraps itself around the person's face and ingests an embryo of an alien, and then from there, So this movie, this is where Ridley Scott really, I think, outdid himself, and that's why I think Alien and Blade Runner, Gladiator are like just some of his best, because Alien, the way the camera travels through hallways, the way everything was just very slow and calculated. It wasn't a sci-fi film like back then. You remember how the sci-fi films back then, they were like, there were shootouts and there was space and all this stuff. This was a horror film. I mean, the lighting that he put on there, and of course, what made this movie was H.R. Geiger's design, which was phenomenal. Like, he's one of my favorite artists.
He's a madman.
He is. Great. I have a bunch of his art books that depict everything from Alien to where the aliens came from, meaning like where Ridley Scott got his ideas and why he actually wanted H.R. Geiger for this role, even though the studio didn't want him at first, but he was like adamant about it. He said, nope, this is actually, that was a missing element, is the alien itself. So I thought it was a great movie. Like I said, scary as hell. This is a movie that was made for $11 million and grossed.
That's insane.
$106 million at the time. So this movie came out, in 1979? And for a movie to make $106 million back then was huge. But we're talking about a movie that was just, you came out of the theater and your legs were shaking.
I mean, the original poster wasn't it just like the shot of space and says no one can hear you scream?
No one can hear you scream, and it's an egg that's cracked with like a green hue light coming out of it. So very, very ominous. Very
yeah. That's the great. I would have never thought to go see this movie in the theater.
Yeah, no, it's a fucking great movie. Like, I mean, one of the biggest things that actually, my dad saw this movie with me, right? And you know what grossed him out? That he said he almost threw up was the alien chest buster scene.
Oh.
My dad said till this day he cannot see that movie because it just turns his stomach when he saw it. I was like, okay. So, but yeah, no, I mean, it was a fantastic, and also had a fantastic cast. And this is where we're talking about having strong, Ridley Scott having very strong female roles. So this was one of Sigourney Weaver's first movies, I think, if not her first leading role, and she pretty much carried the movie throughout the second half of the entire thing. I think almost the whole thing. But you also had a very young Tom Skerritt in there. You have Veronica Cartwright. John Hurt was in it, which was, so incredible movie with an incredible cast also. But it's filmmaking and the way it was portrayed and the way it was, the way it was lit, the way it was designed. It is something that even till this day is a very hard movie to recreate.
Yeah, I mean, just like what I spoke about earlier, like legit. I mean, there's probably like 40 million adults out there that their butthole still puckers up when something hits metal next to them.
So yeah, no, exactly. So here's a movie that, and I think there's a few movies, and I've said this before. There's a few movies out there that their first introduction into film is a huge impact. Their second film is also huge, but after that it just drops. And Alien was one of those for me. So Alien by Ridley Scott was basically a horror film in space. Then came James Cameron, he did an action film on it. Same thing with like Terminator. Terminator, if you really think about it, it's a sci-fi film about of course, a android. Right. But it's one single android who's just chasing this poor girl, and it became like almost a slasher film kind of thing where, it was a horror film. And then, of course, the action film came on the second one. But both franchises, unfortunately, could not replicate what they did for, with those first two movies. Because after that, it just kind of dropped off. Like if you look at every Alien movie after that and every Terminator movie after that, it can never really capture what those, what the first and second one did. The one thing that, of course, Ridley Scott tried to do is go back to the franchise with Prometheus. I wasn't that big of a fan for Prometheus. I think you were.
I thought Prometheus dragged on a little bit, but then, like, once you started getting into the stuff where it started creeping in with the original content from Alien and how it tied together, that's where, like, I was like, oh, man, this is great. Like, it placated to the fans, so... and I tell you, Covenant, I'd have to go back and watch. I'm pretty sure I like that. I don't think I dislike. There's very few.
No, to me, Prometheus was more. To me, Prometheus is an okay movie with a lot of great demo materials if you have a great sound system,
right?
And a great,
the first 5 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So. And that's one of the things that, of course, in our line of work, of course, we always think about, is this movie demo material? Is this movie worth listening on a really good sound system or a really good panel or something like that, or projector? And then this movie actually did a fantastic job when it comes to that. So, yeah, no, absolutely great on that. So that's actually your number one. It's my number two. I think if we really had to... think about it, it's probably, if we average it out, it's really our number one pick is Ridley Scott's actually, second film. so your number one. So here's my top five. My top five was Blade Runner, Alien. Blade Runner number one, Alien number two, Gladiator number three, The Martian number four, and Black Hawk Down number five. Yours was Alien number one, Black Hawk Down number two, Gladiator number three, Legend number four, and Blade Runner number five. I do have some honorable mentions, just like you do. My honorable mentions, and funny enough, this is a movie that got criticized, of course, for inaccuracies. It got criticized for just having such a slow pace to the movie. So 1492, Conquest of Paradise was one that Ridley Scott did about the travel to the New World by Columbus. The reason it's in my honorable mention is first of all, again, a great soundtrack by Vangelis, but also the cinematography was gorgeous on this. The way they shot this was beautifully done. And of course, I also put in there G.I. Jane. Funny G.I. Jane being mentioned in this year's controversy with the what is it, the Oscar slap. But G.I. Jane was another movie that, of course, had a lot of people criticize Viggo Mortensen's accent, which was pretty bad. They criticized, of course, Demi Moore's acting on it. But one thing it really did was that because she shaved her head for real, and of course, her body was in amazing shape. I mean, that was the one thing that I remember they covered a lot when it came to this movie. Prometheus did make it in my honorable mention again, just because that we say that it's great demo material on that. I think that Charlize Theron was pretty good. I wasn't thrilled with the origin of how like the alien came about or something like that. I mean, the last part you see kind of like like the what I would say the evolution of how the alien is supposed to come about. And then, of course, my other honorable mention on that was Kingdom of Heaven, which stars also Orlando Bloom. Another one that was beautifully shot. Very grand movie in scope. Just great battle scenes on that. What were your honorable mentions?
I had Prometheus. The Martian, which I originally had in my top 5, but I bumped it down. I didn't have G.I. Jane, but I meant to have it on there because that it's not his best movie, but like it's still an iconic movie for what it was.
It's
Hannibal.
It's a cheesy movie that you know what the most memorable line in that whole movie for me is when Demi Moore says "suck my dick." But other than that, I mean, yeah, it was just kind of an over the top movie. I don't know. It was just it wasn't very great, but I still for some reason enjoyed it, and especially after Will Smith slapped Chris Rock about the GI Jane #2. I'm like, you see, now I really want them to be a GI Jane #2. But you had American Gangster, which was American Gangster was with who? Denzel Washington.
Yes.
Yeah. So great movie on that. And then of course, then there's Hannibal with Anthony Hopkins. So that was supposed to be was that the sequel or the prequel? No, that was the sequel to.
Was it? I thought it was. I'm trying to remember.
It's a sequel to the 1991 film Silence of the Lambs.
Okay.
And that one actually grossed a lot of movies. That was another one by Ridley Scott. That one actually had an $87 million budget, which grossed about $351.6 million. So excellent movie. So yeah, no. So so those are your honorable mentions and my honorable mentions on that.
We forgot to mention his awesome directorial debut of commercials for the 1984 product that didn't really survive very much. Apple computers.
So funny enough, I saw that and I meant to actually mention that a little earlier. So actually, that commercial was based off of the movie 1984 or something like that, which was about the dystopian future.
I love 1984, dude.
Yeah, so this commercial, believe it or not, in advertising schools and things like that, still considered one of the top 100 commercials of all time. Because of it was just very, very well made, artistically done, awesome. It was just an awesome commercial for the time. It was really good. So I'll run down very quickly a lot of the movies that he has done, and he doesn't have like that big of a list of movies. So he started in 1977 with The Duelist, then came Alien, Blade Runner, Legend, Someone to Watch Over Me, never seen that one, Black Rain, Thelma and Louise, which I saw for the first time a couple of days ago. 1492, A Conquest of Paradise, White Squall, G.I. Jane, Gladiator, Hannibal, Black Hawk Down, Matchstick Men, which I saw the other day too. It's actually a great film. That's with Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, it's very good. Yeah.
Kingdom of Heaven, A Good Year, American Gangster, Body of Lies, Robin Hood, Prometheus, The Counselor, Exodus, Gods and Kings. Very interesting thing about that. Gods and Kings was one of the first group of 4K Blu-ray disc that came out, and it was actually criticized for being dark. So So then The Martian, Alien Covenant, All the Money in the World, The Last Duel, which I also saw, and I thought it was actually an excellent movie on that. And then House of Gucci, which I never got to see, and I hear good things about that. And then the new one that's going to be coming out in Apple TV, which is Napoleon. And believe it or not, after Napoleon, he's going back to Gladiator.
Yeah, that made me really sad.
So that's
I just saw that along with another Alien prequel.
Really?
And
sometimes they should just leave shit alone, man. Just leave it alone.
I don't mind seeing Gladiator, a second one, but like, I don't know. I'd rather him do it not tied into the same storyline, because you can't really.
Well, I mean, that's going to depend on what he actually does with it. I mean, I've heard that rumor has been around for a while that he was going to do a second movie for Gladiator. It's not known whether he's going to do a prequel or a sequel. And of course, Russell Crowe is not coming back. So people are thinking that, how is he going to make Russell Crowe come back? And that's not the case. But I don't know. We'll have to see how that works, and and how he makes that happen. Hopefully, if he does, I mean, I don't think it's going to have the success and the impact that the first Gladiator did. But I'll be very interested in seeing what he comes up with. So yep, that should be that's actually our show. That should actually do it for us. So yeah, that's our top 5. So next time I would say join us for another top 5. Who knows when that's going to be? But I like doing these little things. I was going to do a top 10, but then I was like, oh, it'd take too long. So, and as a matter of fact, there's some filmmakers like Quentin Tarantino that I don't think they have 10. So we'll have to stick with 5 or something like that. But so you guys could join us, so you guys could find us on on our different social media platforms. So we're on Facebook on Fantasy Picks Movie Edition. We're also on Twitter at Fantasy Picks ME. Instagram, Fantasy Picks Movie Edition, and you can also email us at fantasypicksmovieedition@gmail.com. You can also find us on most of your podcast apps, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or whatever podcast player of your choice you use. If ratings are available, give us a rating or review on all of those platforms out there. So yeah, so we would love to hear from you guys. Really like to connect with everybody who actually hears from us. I don't care what country you're from or where you're coming from. So that's why there's Google Translate. But yeah, let us hear from you guys. We would love to hear from you and connect with our audience out there. Other than that, yeah, that's all I have for today. So my name is Rob, and this is Ralph, and that is it for our show today.